evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Stu Hardy, the Chair of the Planning Board, and I am convening our special June 21, 2022 meeting of the Tiverton Planning Board, now that it is 6:32. I would, before I introduce the applicant's team, I'd like to actually have a roll call of members of the planning board because we just barely have a quorum. So I'd like to start with Christopher Shriver, who is not here, although he may come in later on. So he's absent. Christine Shea?
Here.
And Janice, you're here. Amanda Souza Vieira is not here. Rosemary Eva is here. Stu Hardy is here, and Adam Raposa is present. So we have 5 members present, and some of the others may come in a little later. So I'd like to invite the applicants to come forward. I see Chris Harkins, and Mr. Landry, the legal counsel for the applicant, and Karen Beck is representing Tom Principe and is a engineer with Principe Engineering. And also in the front row is Todd Brayton with Bryant Associates, who has done the traffic study. And this will be a public hearing, so anybody in the audience will have an opportunity to ask questions. Is it fine with the applicant if we just sort of start off with a brief discussion of some of the loose ends, where we stand now, because it's been a while since we were together, and there are a number of fairly easy to tie up loose ends, but they need to be tied up before we can go ahead and make findings of fact and approve the preliminary plan with conditions. So I'd like to kind of start that process if that's agreeable, and just curious, one thing that we voted on earlier and that is in the works now, and this is a responsibility of the planning board and the planning department, is the status of the Par Corporation's response to the fire chief, Robert Lloyd. Back in 2016, the Tiverton fire chief, Robert Lloyd, was very critical of the study that Par Corporation did, Mr. Timothy Tice, and had a number of questions and concerns, and so we had agreed that we would send that letter to Par and get their written response to the criticisms that Chief Lloyd made. So that's our loose end to tie up. Also, we mentioned the possibility of a structural engineer doing an analysis of the seismic activity caused by the quarrying activity across the street done by Tiverton Materials on Fish Road. And the applicant did promise to, I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, to hire a structural engineer who could look into that and then give the board more information about that issue. We are in the process, the town of the Tiverton Planning Board and the Planning Department are in the process of hiring, we hope, a traffic engineer to do a peer review of the Bryant Associates traffic study. We don't know who that is yet. There are also a number of conditions that were placed on a master plan approval back in December of 2016, and some of those are still being worked on. And here's my list, and correct me if I'm inaccurate. Condition number 2 was that there be adequate water for consumption, for household consumption, and for fire suppression without causing volume and pressure problems elsewhere in the North Tiverton Fire District distribution system. And again, I think that will be largely answered if we can get a written response from PAR to the criticisms that the fire chief made back at that time. Condition number 3, traffic circulation in the development and in the abutting roads, such as Sousa, Fish, and Main, and at key intersections, and also making sure that pedestrian circulation, people hiking, walking, on bicycles, that those there's adequate conditions for that to be done safely. And again, we are in the process of getting a peer review of the Bryant material. Number 5, an infrastructure plan that will have all of the utilities noted, I don't believe that has been done yet, but probably that gets done fairly late in the process because the exact footprint of the buildings has not yet been determined. And maybe the exact footprint of some of the roads and alleyways hasn't yet been determined. So that was condition number 5. Condition number 6 requested that the low and moderate income units in the development be fully integrated into the market rate units, so that you don't have a ghetto situation in which the low and moderate income units are all segregated together. But that should also be shown on the plan, and I don't believe that's been done yet. But again, that gets done fairly late in the process. I wouldn't expect that to be done until we're ready to approve the preliminary plan. Number 7 is an easy one, a new name, and I recall that the Tiverton Historic Preservation Advisory Board's chair actually recommended a new name. The name Tiverton Heights is already taken. It's actually directly across Highland Road from where we're sitting tonight. It's up on that ridge. Check out any of the old maps of Tiverton and you'll see it. But the suggestion was, since your development is actually in a part of town called Pocasset Heights, sometimes also known as Pocasset Ridge, that might be a good name, but that's entirely up to you, and that's not a big deal. That should be fairly easy to dispense with. And then condition number 9 was simply a letter to RIDOT, Rhode Island Department of Transportation, requesting RIDOT input into the traffic situation on Fish, Sousa, Main, and in particular, I think, the intersection of Fish, of Sousa, Main, and Schooner Drive. Now we do have an indication from RIDOT that Fish Road, Sousa Road, and that section of Main Road in the vicinity of the proposed project has been put on a priority list for work using the funding of the infrastructure legislation that was enacted by Congress and signed by the President back in January of this year. So I do have that list. And maybe Todd can tell us a little bit more about that later on. Again, we don't know when the work is to be done because timetables do tend to slip a little bit. So I'd also like to mention that I think that we didn't request a peer review of environmental issues on the property, even though the property is quite large. What is it, 135 acres plus? Because so much of the project is under permit by Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, in particular two permits, the RIPDES permit, which is stormwater runoff and impact on freshwater and saltwater, and also the wetlands permit. So we didn't request any environmental peer review, but I think we do need to have an open space plan that will be consistent with RIPDES and with the wetlands permit, and that will be something that can be handed over to the association, the homeowners association, the condominium association, to implement and carry out when the developers are finished. And so I'd like to see that done, but there are models for that kind of thing, and I don't think that would be very difficult to deal with. So those are just some of the ideas. Also, I'd like to point out that I went through the minutes for the technical review committee meeting that was held just about a year ago, July 20th, 21, and a number of items came up that we might want to address, or that I would recommend that the applicant at least be reminded of. So one item was the fire marshal. The Tiverton fire marshal was present at that ad hoc TRC meeting and called for more hydrants on site to meet the National Fire Prevention Association standards. So that's one thing that came up. Also, while we're talking about that, one thing that Pear Corporation's Tim Tice recommended was, I believe, additional pump capacity to increase the water pressure on the project. The fire marshal also noted that one or more dead-end roads needs a turnaround, needs to have to show a turnaround on the plan, and a turnaround that would be adequate for fire equipment. Also at the ad hoc TRC, the planner requested additional plan sheets showing the exact dimensions, and I think she was talking primarily about phase 2. That's the phase that will contain 146 units, and that will be accessed from Sousa Road. And she requested that new plan sheets be provided that would more clearly depict the footprint of those buildings, and also the footprint of the alleys and the interior roads, so that it's a lot easier to see than on the plans that I have here with me tonight, which that happens, that phase 2 is the very dense phase where it's really difficult to actually see where the buildings are. So I don't think that Tom ever did that, Tom Principe ever did that, but maybe that's on his list of things to do. But I would certainly like to see it, and this would be an opportunity to actually have a slide and be able to project that up on our screen here so that the audience could also see exactly where those buildings are and how close together they are. So we all know what we're really looking at and what we could possibly see built here. Just a few other items. It was requested that the plan should also show the footprint of the recreational amenities. I think Tom has actually taken care of that, so that one may be done. We can ask Karen Beck about that in a minute. Alleyways should show pervious and impervious surface. That was a request that Peter Bramante made, which I think is a good idea. Also, I think he asked about sidewalks. We know that they're going to be 5 feet in width, but what material will they be constructed of? Will it be asphalt or concrete? Concrete, of course, is higher quality. And also, the plan should show how the sidewalks connect, so that we get a better sense of, because there will be people using the sidewalks. And then finally, landscaping plan showing not only the interior but also the buffer, landscaped buffer along Fish Road and along Sousa Road. So we do have a landscape plan that Karen will be addressing tonight. So that's all those are the only loose ends I could think of, but I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have those items still pending and that need a little bit more information. So having said that, I'm happy to introduce.
Maybe some of us have some comments too.
Oh, absolutely. Does anybody have any more loose ends or comments on loose ends or?
I do.
Yes.
Mr. Landry, I apologize I was not here at the
Could you
last.
speak into the mic? Thank you.
I apologize I was not here at the last meeting, but I did listen to the audio of the entire meeting, and I had a couple questions. Perhaps you and Mr. Harkins could clarify them for me. And I was going to ask the board also. The environmental report is important to me, and I think we have done this in so many of the large developments in town. I think it would be prudent for the board to have such a report.
Could you speak up just a bit?
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I don't think it's on.
Is it on?
You're on.
Sorry. But I think the environmental plan is very important. We've done it for several of the solar projects, the large projects, and concern has been given by residents over there of the various deer in that area. And there may be some other species that, might be a problem. And I think Sage did a very good job for us on the other large projects, but that's up to the board. The other thing, Mr. Landry, was listening to the tape. There was a discussion between you and Mr. Principe about a letter that came from Scott Rabideau, and I don't have any letter from Scott Rabideau in my packet. Perhaps it was an oversight that we didn't get.
No, I think that's the report that you were inquiring about. He did an assessment that we provided
Did we
at the
get it?
earlier stages, so we'll make sure you get another copy of it. I know we provided like 20 copies of all these things, and, people come and go, and they can't always be retrieved, so we'll provide some more copies of the Scott Rabideau report.
Okay.
Happy to do that.
All right.
This was one done back in 2015, correct?
No, this is
Recent.
a new one.
Oh, really?
An environmental study.
Oh, I haven't,
Exactly
I haven't
modeled
seen
off
that.
of what you all did for the casino project.
has anybody on the board seen anything from, what Scott Rabideau's company is called?
Natural resources.
Natural Resources.
Tom submitted it with the rest of the main package.
And that was submitted last year?
A number of months ago.
A number of months ago.
Yeah, this year.
I did not see it. That's, I take a great deal of interest in environmental, and I did not see it. And I went through every scrap of paper I had over the weekend in preparation for this meeting, and I did not see it. So, again, that's not your fault, that's our fault. I want to make that clear. It is the fault of
We'll have to look for
our
it.
operation that it was delivered here but never distributed to the members of the
Okay.
board.
Okay,
So-
well, it might have gotten confused with some of the DEM things, because this is something that we were also required to do for
Yeah.
them. And that was the structure of the report, so we'll provide additional copies of it.
Appreciate that.
That would be very helpful.
It was separate from the DEM work, but
Okay. It's probably buried somewhere. The other thing was, is North Tiverton providing the project, the entire project with the water? Or it will be, okay. Because we have another development close by that has another supplier. Okay.
Is there anybody else on the board that can think of anything that we really need to address at preliminary plan stage? Keeping in mind that, that when we approve the preliminary plan, conditional or not, then we go into the final plan, and the final plan is really, we're not looking at substantive issues in the final plan. We're looking at legal technicalities, basically, in a final plan. So it's important to make sure we look at everything we really need to look at. I don't see anybody on the board who has anything to add. Mr. Solicitor, would it be appropriate for me to ask if anybody in the audience would like to address loose ends or items that are pertinent to making sound findings of fact that have not been mentioned? Oh, yes, Janice.
I have requested several times a copy of new site plans since you've made the changes. All we've gotten is this.
I mean,
We haven't seen,
The most
Mind if I
recent
ask you
is,
what the date is on that one?
This one
That's.
is April 5th.
That was the architectural plan,
April
right?
5th,
2022?
yes.
That hasn't changed. I don't think any of the site plans have changed since April.
well,
That's
right,
not
but
a
I mean,
site
that's
plan.
not a site plan.
that's not a
So
site.
that's the Union Studios, if
Correct.
I'm seeing that correctly.
Correct.
That's putting the buildings on the site by unit types. The site plans are the Principe engineering plans that have gone to DEM for final approval. Those plans have not changed.
so the most recent plans that I have are dated March 18, 2021.
That's probably the DEM approved
This is the DEM approved,
plans.
because every single page has a DEM approval on it.
Yep, yep.
Right.
So
that's the
this
final
is state-of-the-art then?
But that's different
Okay.
from this one.
So, but that's, right, that's not, that's just
Right, but
an
this is
architectural-
where you've divvied everything up into two sections.
That's been done on the, on the engineering plans as well, but that's more of an architectural
Right.
presentation.
Correct.
It's easier to see, I think. It's easier to follow than the engineering plans that have a lot more detail on them, but
Mr. Linder
that
doesn't have an
date
objection.
precedes our preliminary plan submission by 60 days or so. I mean, we filed the application, we had a TRC meeting last July, so we were probably in here within a matter of weeks after that plan was submitted. We've taken a lot of information in, but we haven't submitted revised plans, either engineering plans or the Union Studios architectural design.
those are the final plans.
Yeah. Doesn't mean that
That
we
you all
won't.
have.
It doesn't mean that we won't, but those plans have not been changed since we first submitted.
Okay.
So I see Rick Rogers, our DPW director, and Rick actually participated in that ad hoc TRC last July. So Rick, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Stu. And Todd, or you may say, Stu, whether this is appropriate time to bring this up, but is it now or later that DPW asks how the potential buyers or renters, as the case may be, are notified what services are provided by whom in regards to anything? Water, sewer, plowing, trash, recycle, potholes, you name it. And maybe this is not the right time, Todd or Stu, but we get multiple calls in subdivisions, people complaining that they did not understand that services are not provided by the town. And my understanding is most, if not all, services will be supplied in a private manner in this development. But I'd like to know how that will be told to prospective buyers and/or renters. Thank you.
Well,
We can answer that, and it's a good question. This development's going to be held in a condominium form of ownership. And even the single-family type dwellings that look like a single-family home, that is to be sold as a condominium. That's still a structure with all common land. And at the final plan stage, one of the requirements is all homeowners' documents, and condominiums require a prospectus. It's called a public offering statement that has everything that anyone would need to know about the development that's important. The title, the amenities, the first year budget, what it's going to cost. There are 12 or 13 things that need to be specifically identified. And that's where we would typically make the disclosures. One of them will have to do with the blasting that takes place at Tiverton Materials. Whatever disclosures you'd like us to make, and we'll know what services are what, that has to be reviewed by the town solicitor and approved as part of the final approval process. And that document has to be distributed 7 days at least before a purchase and sale agreement can be executed. So it's really a good disclosure document, and I think that's the best home for that type of disclosure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In addition, there will be notes on the final plans that are recorded regarding some of those issues.
And does that mean, Todd, that anybody who buys that unit from the current owner 10 years from now, they're also notified with that disclosure?
So subsequent purchasers would have notice of anything that's recorded in the land evidence records. And that's why some of those disclosures would be recorded on the final plan and/or decision.
Okay. So it would be the responsibility of the new purchaser to do their due diligence to see in the recorded documents that services are provided by A, B, and C.
Correct.
Okay. Thank
It's
you.
all public knowledge, though.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
The public will have an opportunity to make statements or ask questions later on, but I think right now, yes, Chris?
Just wanted to follow up with a couple of your comments were related to technical review committee, your notes on that. I think 1 and 2 were addressed by Tom. And that was, a fire hydrant and, confirming lengths of a couple of roads to confirm whether a turnaround needed to be done there or not. So I think those 2 things were addressed, along with that open space management plan, environmental plan study that was done. Obviously, you guys haven't seen it, but we'll figure out and make sure you do see that. So out of those lists of things, there's a few of those I think that have been checked off. but-
Tom Principe agreed to the fire hydrants and the additional pumping capacity for pressure, I believe, but I don't think they ever got onto plans,
I think they might have, but I'm gonna make
because
sure.
they're not on the plans. The most recent plans that Tom has presented, apart from the landscape, is dated March 18, 2021, before the TRC.
Okay, I'll double check.
So,
But I know we've-
but Tom needs to do that, because I'm
Okay.
sure the fire marshal will go right to
Yeah, sure.
it and say it's either there or it's not there.
That
No,
was
it's not there. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you going to say?
No, that was all right. No, that was a concern, because it looks as though there were some dead-end streets there, or alleys, whatever they call them, because we can't see. All we're looking at are the architectural plans, but when we get the new plans, I guess we'll have a better understanding.
Well, those are all on those plans.
DDM.
No, those are on the Union Studios plans.
Yeah.
And they're a lot easier to see on those plans than
Yes.
they are on the engineer's plans.
They are, that is definitely so, but even so, if it's not too much of a burden on the applicant, I think it would be great to have something that we could actually put up on the screen behind me at some point, so that everybody in the audience could see exactly what Phase 2 looks like in its present planning stage.
Okay. I will just add to what Chris said, that part of the drainage and pumping capacity business has to do with the PAR final assessment, as the chair has already mentioned. And part of that involved additional study that PAR previously said was needed in the northeast quadrant of our property near Fish Road, where he thought there might be a need for a pumping station within the development to get to domestic and fire flow pressures in that northern quadrant. That was an unknown in PAR's earlier report, Mr. Tease's earlier report from 2016. And we had been trying to get PAR Engineering to do that additional work for us. And their response was, well, we were working for the town, so, if the town asks us to do that, we'll do it. And then we tried to fold those two things together when the board had the discussion about PAR Engineering doing a supplemental water pressure hydrology analysis, both that interior corner of the site and the responses to the fire chief's concerns from 2016. So that will help us understand what additional pumping elements. We don't believe it to be a problem with the overall system because PAR already confirmed the first time that there's enough water in the system. The issue is to get it from point A to point B within our site, do we need additional pumping capacity? So we're aware of those issues. They're open issues. From a drainage, from a hydrology point of view, we think both of those questions should be answered by PAR, correct?
I think that's what we agreed to in our previous meeting, right, or last meeting, that they were gonna be engaged to do that work, and I'm not personally sure where things stand on that.
We're not either, but we're working on it.
That slipped.
It's a-
I will contact PAR this week. Mr. Landry, were you in direct conversation with Mr. Tice or someone else at PAR?
No, Tim Ties, I think is it Theys?
Whatever it is.
But he's the water guy there and is very prominent, all things water. And
Right.
he's the person who did the review the first time.
All right, I will
And I
contact
believe
him.
he's also the one who advised Mr. Principe that, he likes working with Mr. Principe, but he doesn't, Mr. Principe doesn't tell him what to do for the town, because the town had, I think Mr. Hardy had engaged PAR as part of the master plan review process.
I will be in touch with him this week.
So, just an organizational issue here now. Would you like to present two of your experts for traffic and for landscaping at this time? So that would be Todd and Karen.
Yes.
And so if they could make sort of a brief presentation, then I think we can open it up for questions, not only from the planning board members, but also from the general public. And then, of course, the general public can address any issues they want. So we're not restricted to traffic and landscaping. But is that agreeable to the applicant? Does that sound like a good way to?
Absolutely, and we do realize the Bryant report is not peer-reviewed yet. Mr. Brayton may have to come back again. But what you've got now is a report from 2016, an updated report from April of 2022, a memorandum, an update memorandum. One of the things the board the commission has been concerned about has been the other developments that have been approved in the area and future impacts and how those are taken into consideration, and Mr. Brayton has addressed those things. And as far as Karen Beck is concerned, she is with Principe, and she's the one who is continuing to develop the landscaping features of the project, and I don't think I need to say anything more about that. She'll do that.
Super.
One at a time, if you want to come up first.
I think Mr. Brayton should present for us. There's a little more to that than landscaping.
Good evening. Just one quick correction. The revised traffic report was actually from 2020. It was originally done in 2016, but it was updated in 2020, just to correct that.
With a further memorandum.
With the further memorandum in 2022, yes. So good evening. My name is Todd Brayton. I'm with Bryant Associates. So we've been working on this project for several years now. We had done the original traffic report, again, back in 2016, revised that in August of 2020. So at that point, the development consisted of 305 total units, which subsequently was reduced to 275 total units. So I addressed that in the supplemental memo from April of 2022. Just a quick summary. There are 3 driveways for the development on Fish Road and one on Sousa Road. The study area of our traffic report consisted of Fish Road from Sousa Road up to those proposed driveways, as well as the entire length of Sousa Road between Main Road and Fish Road. We had done traffic counts initially back in 2015, which was prior to COVID, obviously. We've done several field reviews of the area over the course of the years, looking at various things, stopping site distances, posted speed limits, operations, that sort of thing. We had also collected speed data on Fish Road and Sousa Road back in 2015. We've collected crash data from the Tiverton Police Department. We've done that 2 different times. We did it from 2012 to almost to 2016, and then 2017 through most of 2020. And also, when we were working with VIDA on the physical alteration permit application for the project, they did provide us with some additional data from May of 2019, again, pre-COVID, that we had looked at, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. In terms of the traffic forecast for the development, trip generation, in terms of the number of trips that would be generated, so we had looked at it for the revised traffic study, again, based on the 305 units. We looked at it again more recently, based on the 275 units, and based on that reduction in units, there actually is, as you'd anticipate, there is a reduction in the number of trips that development would generate. About, I think it's 5 fewer trips in the AM peak hour and 12 fewer trips in the PM peak hour. And another thing that happened between the revised traffic report in 2020 and our supplemental memo was that, and this is what I think mostly came out of the work with DEM, is that the project was split, as Ms. Hardy mentioned earlier. There's now 2 phases that are separated. Initially, they had been connected, but now they are not. Phase 2 being to the west, and Phase 1 to the east. And I think, as also was mentioned, Phase 2 would use the Sousa Road driveway. Phase 1 would use the Fish Road driveways. So one thing we also, in the supplemental memo, we looked at how that distribution would impact the analysis that was done in the revised traffic impact analysis. And based on the reduced trip generation and the revised site layout, there was pretty much no change in the traffic, very minimal, a few cars here or there at the driveway, so nothing negligible. So as mentioned, we had got the traffic counts in 2015. We expanded those traffic counts to a future date in order to estimate what the traffic would be like at that date. And we had used a 1% annual growth rate. As it turns out, based on newer data that came after our original report, the actual growth rates are actually much lower than that, so our estimation of future growth was actually very conservative. So we also looked at the data from 2015 that we collected versus the data from 2019 that we've received from RIDOT, and then also comparing that to what was expanded to future date. And we realized that we actually, the traffic volumes were higher, much higher actually, significantly higher than the data that was collected in 2019 by RIDOT. As also as mentioned by Mr. Landry, when we did the report, there were several approved projects in the area that were included in our future no-build traffic volumes, including the remaining build-out of the village of Mount Hope Bay, the proposed Bayview mixed-use development, and the Harbor Ridge residential development. There were also a couple of other developments, Lifespan Medical Building and Longplex, that in the report that we had received from the town that was done for those developments, it didn't have specific trip duration calculations that we could use, although based on our very conservative expansion to a future volume, we think that would cover those traffic volumes adequately. So based on the traffic counts, the trip duration, we looked at the capacity analysis for the key intersections in the area, which consists of the driveways on Fish Road and Sousa Road, as well as the intersection of Fish Road and Sousa Road, and Main Road and Sousa Road. We looked at the peak hours for those intersections being the most critical time periods, the AM peak and the PM peak. Okay, I have one other thing. So another thing that we looked at in the supplemental memo, there was a change from when we had done our revised traffic study until now in the plans, where the driveway configuration was slightly different. The most northern driveway on Fish Road in our original report, it was analyzed as being almost like a one-way circulator. You would enter on one side of the median and exit on the other. That has now changed. It's two-way traffic on the northern side of that, and it's an exit only to the south. So we looked at that as well in our supplemental memo that was submitted a couple months ago. So based on this analysis for future conditions, it was determined that the driveways on Fish Road and Sousa Road would operate at a level of service of B or better, so excellent levels of service for both AM and PM. In terms of the revised configuration, we kind of compared that. It's the same level of service even with the revised driveway configuration that we had looked at. The intersection of Fish Road and Sousa Road will have the same level of service for the AM and PM peak hours, with the exception of the eastbound approach, which changes from level of service B to level of service C. But again, it will still continue to operate at acceptable level of service. The intersection of Main Road, Sousa Road, and Schooner Drive, the level of service would not change from future no-build to future build conditions, with the exception of the Sousa Road approach during the AM peak hour, which would change from level of service C to level of service D. We did note that the eastbound and westbound approaches at that intersection do operate at level of service F under both future no-build and future build conditions. Although again, probably because of our conservative growth rate that was used, maybe those delays aren't quite as high as they're shown in the report, but it is still shown as a level of service F. So when we're going through the PAP process, the physical alteration permit application process with RIDOT, they had actually asked us to look at whether a signal, a traffic signal would be warranted at the intersection of Main Road, Sousa Road, and Schooner Drive. So we did do an analysis to determine if a signal would be warranted. And based on the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which contains 9 warrants which are reviewed to determine if a traffic signal could be considered, 4 of those warrants are applicable, but they are not met by the traffic volumes, either existing or proposed. And then five others are not applicable for various reasons. They're not within the school network and various things. It is recommended to keep monitoring the intersection in the future. I know there's other developments that are also being proposed in the area that will also increase the traffic, so it's something that the town and the state should definitely keep monitoring as they move forward to see how it does operate. We looked at stopping site distance and intersection site distance at all of the driveways on Fish Road and Sousa Road, and they all meet the required stopping site distance. For intersection site distance, it's recommended that the vegetation along the driveways is cleared, and that is notated on the plans, just to make sure that the sight lines are adequate for the driveways. So for the crash history that we looked at, it turned out it's about between 7.5 and 8 years total data, and there were 33 crashes in that time frame. The intersection had the most crashes was Main, Sousa, and Schooner, total of 15 crashes, so that equates to about 2 per year. So it's not a lot of accidents at anywhere in the study area, and no unusual conditions that would be worsened by the proposed development. The proposed layout was reviewed, and it will safely accommodate the traffic that will enter and exit the site, and will allow for the safe movement of emergency vehicles. So in conclusion, the proposed driveways will operate at excellent levels of service. The Fish Road, Sousa Fish Road, Sousa Road intersection will continue to operate at acceptable levels of service. Main Road, Sousa Road, and Schooner Drive will continue to operate at acceptable level of service in the AM peak hour and will not change during the PM peak hour. However, as mentioned previously, it's recommended to monitor that intersection in the future to see if a traffic signal may be warranted at that point. The geometric configuration of the proposed site driveways is such that adequate safe stopping site distance and intersection site distance exists for traffic passing and/or utilizing the site. And again, it's recommended to cut back the vegetation at those driveways to ensure adequate site distance is provided. No existing unsafe conditions in the vicinity of develop are present. And based upon the analysis, traffic operations on the surrounding roadways and intersections will experience minimal change with the addition of the traffic generated by the proposed development, and no reduction in safety will occur as proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Brayton. Does anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Brayton? Christine?
It says there's 217 current trips. That's for what you're saying is going to be added to the road. Do you know what the number is now?
In terms of the volumes on the roads?
Right.
I do have that somewhere.
Just wondering if that's like twice the cars, 3 times the cars?
Well, I know from my notes that Fish Road has about 4,700 vehicles a day, and Sousa Road has about 2,000 vehicles a day. I'd have to look a little closer to actually see what the specific volumes are, but I don't, I can't, without looking at that, I can't say exactly how much more compared to existing for the actual peak hours. But it's not a significant amount based on the daily traffic.
Have you taken into consideration, I know you did peak hours, but the school buses in the morning and the afternoon?
So in the morning, definitely the school buses are probably accounted for in the traffic volumes. In the afternoon, the peaks typically are later. The volumes in general are higher in the PM during the regular commuter hours. So like typically like from 4 to 6 compared to the earlier timeframes for the school buses. So that's why we look at that, just because the volumes are higher. So if it operates a certain way at those hours, it would be as good or better in the other hours, which would include the afternoon peak hour for when the schools might be in session. So like more towards mid-afternoon.
We do have buses that travel at 4.
Right, so
They
yeah.
create a lot of backup.
But again, the overall traffic volumes are less at those times in the afternoon. But again, in the morning, it would be accounted for.
Todd, you factored in the Tiverton materials traffic too? I mean, even though it was COVID time?
We didn't do anything specific, only what we counted. So there was obviously, when we did the counts, there was traffic from there coming in and out. But we didn't make any adjustments for Tiverton materials, no.
I've got a number of questions, actually, and then if no one else on the board would like to say anything more, I'll open it up to the public. Just to follow up on what Janice was saying, so there's one entrance into Phase 2, which includes 146 units, and that entrance is on a very narrow road with virtually no shoulders. School buses came to my mind as well, because there are going to be a number of kids coming in and out, and the school bus will stop right there at the intersection. I think that that's an issue that is going to cause problems. Given the width of Sousa Road, and even if RIDOT does repair Sousa Road in 2022, as they promised to do, they have no plans to extend the width of Sousa Road, at least from my reading of what was presented to us. So I think school buses on Sousa is an issue that I'm raising.
So just to
Yes,
respond
go
to that, we did do turning movements for school buses at the intersections. I think that was something that was requested at one of the previous meetings. And there is adequate space for school buses to turn into and out of the driveway on Sousa Road, from Sousa Road. So even though it is relatively narrow, there is enough space for school buses to turn in and out.
Yes, but what about the other traffic? Well, the school buses are turning in and out.
Well,
There's other traffic.
There is, right. But but there is enough room for, and actually, I'd have to go back and check exactly, but I think I know some of the intersections, there is enough space for the school buses to turn in and out while cars are in the opposite direction.
So, Todd, another issue, your traffic count was done in early December of 2015 and adjusted for subsequent growth in traffic, but it was done in December. And that reminded me that the letter that we received from the attorney for Tiverton Materials across Fish Road from your project said that it didn't take into account the heavy truck traffic that goes on during the warmer months. You all got the same letter. He pointed out that in the summer, there's considerably more truck traffic, not only from his organization, but also from the propane firm, also right in the neighborhood. And that also reminded me of the fact that here in Tiverton, traffic goes up substantially in the summer. Not only the usual beach traffic, but we have a lot of summer homes. We have a lot of holiday homes and summer homes in Tiverton, and a huge number in Westport and Little Compton. And anybody who lives in Tiverton knows that it's tougher to get out of our side streets onto the main roads in the summer than it is in December. So I think choosing December kind of underestimated, and this is an issue I'll take up with the peer reviewer as well, but kind of underestimated the typical, the worst case traffic situations which typically occur in July and August around here.
A couple of points to that. First, when we first started looking at this, one of the requests from the planning board at that time, which, several years ago, I think it was because there was other projects that were done at that time that were counted in the summer, and they actually asked us to not to count during the summer, but count when school was open. So we made sure that we got the counts done when school was open. And then in terms of the summer, so the counts from DOT were actually from May, so not quite exactly in the summer.
They were from early May.
So not a direct comparison, but the fines in December of 2015, for the most part, were much higher than those taken in May of 2019.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to say that I think that the certainly based on your report, the most problematical traffic outside of the project is at the intersection of Sousa, Main, and Schooner Drive. And anybody in this room who has been down to the Boathouse Restaurant and who comes up Schooner and is either turning onto Main, going north or south on Main Road, or going directly across and carrying on up Sousa, knows that that is a very scary intersection because there is very inadequate sight and stopping distance, and I'm basing this on the standards that are provided for by AASHTO, the Association of American State Highway Traffic Officers, officials. It's like a quarter of what it should be. And your report correctly states that the level of service, which is a subjective indicator and kind of takes into account how motorists actually feel about a road or an intersection, the level of service at that intersection is F, the worst possible. So A is the best, F is the worst. F is really failing, and I've got the definition. I won't bore everybody with the definition, but basically F is dysfunctional. So that is really scary, and repaving Sousa and Main is going to do nothing, because the problem at that intersection is the lack of sight distance.
Just one clarification on that. So when you're referring to the site, are you talking about the Schooner Drive?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, because that's something that's obviously not directly impacted by this development, because they don't, not to say that no one would use that intersection to come or go to this development, but it's mostly coming the other direction, which there is adequate sight distance, I know, definitely on the other side, on the Sousa Road side.
Well, no, people who live certainly in Phase 2 are going to be using that intersection all the time.
No, I understand that, but
You know,
they
they're
primarily...
gonna use it virtually every day, because that's how you get to the banks, the grocery store, the post office. You have to use that intersection. Right. So that's problematical, and it's not just your project, but it's all of the projects in that area that are going to be dealing with that. The other thing I'd like to say about that intersection is I'm not sure that your crash statistics are taking into account all of the fender benders that we've had, and not just fender benders, but there have been a couple of really serious accidents that have actually closed Main Road. One last summer and one about 2 months ago actually closed Main Road. I think we need more recent traffic or more recent data from the police department showing the crashes and the severity of the crashes at that intersection. I'm just giving you some warning here that you might want to look into that, right, because I think everybody who lives in Tiverton knows that that's a problematical area.
Right. So again, we had, as I mentioned earlier, we did collect crash data from the Tiverton Police Department the first time around for about 3.5, almost 4 years of data, and then we looked again and we got another 3.5 years. It wasn't, I think it was through about 2 years ago, so it's not completely up to date and recent, but we did look at a long stretch of time at that intersection. In terms of the crash data provided from the police department, if there's anything that they didn't have, then there's no way of knowing that, but everything they had, they gave to us.
Well, I'd actually like to have somebody from the police department actually come in here and address that issue, because I sense, and I know this is anecdotal and not scientific, but I sense that that's a serious, that's a problematical intersection. So my last question to you, Todd, is that I couldn't find anything in your report, your most recent one or the earlier versions, that really talked about circulation inside the project. And that concerns me, because when I look at Phase 2 in particular, I see very narrow roads, and I see driveways that couldn't even handle an SUV without the back end of the SUV sticking out into the road. And the roads, I believe, are they 20 feet wide? 20 feet comes to mind. I may be wrong about that. I'm not talking about the alleyways. I like the alleyways, because that will just be a convenience for the people who actually live on the alleyway. But the roads are a concern if there is not adequate space on the driveways. People are going to be parking on the road, and the roads are very narrow. I anticipate a problem here, so that's an issue I'm going to take up with the peer reviewer, and also an issue that I'd like maybe for you to look into and give us some thoughts about that. Because the way I look at, anybody around this table, you've seen the plans, take a look at the driveways.
Driveways are in the back, though, on the alley side, not in front. So the main front, the main roads are wide roads on purpose, with parking out on the streets. And then-
That's not,
and then
that's not,
driveways are in the back of the houses.
that's not always the case. I don't
It is
believe.
for all the internals where there's alleys. Otherwise, on the perimeters, there's longer driveways, plenty of driveway room. So I just want to be clear about what we're talking about. Like, if we're going to say things like that, we should point them out
Right.
and truly
Well,
talk about it dimensionally.
I'd actually like to hear some numbers, exactly how big the driveways are and where they are, because as I look at the plans, and they're hard to read, but as I look at the plans, I saw very, very short driveways. Okay, that's all I had to say. And we're still on traffic, and Todd's still in the hot seat here. Does anybody else on the planning board have anything to say, or can I turn this over to the public? And then, of course, if you can think of something later on. Okay, I'd like to invite any member of the public, and I see Jay Edwards with his. No, we're talking traffic. We are talking traffic, and we're going to stay on traffic, and then we'll move to Karen, and Karen is landscaping. So anybody from the general public, Jay Edwards had his hand up first, and then Carol Herman had her hand up. So Jay, if you would speak into the mic, because we're all on television now, so we want to make sure you're.
About time. Okay, I'm Jay Edwards. I live at 143 Merritt Avenue, which is North Tiverton. I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm not a mathematician. However, this project went from 305 to 275? 30 units? You said there would be 17 fewer trips? Do these people carpool? Do they not own cars? Do they not work and have to go to work? Do they not have kids that have to go to soccer and everything else? Where are you finding these people? That's number one. Number two, 275 units. They're all going to have at least one car. Many of them will have two, probably most of them. They're all going to have kids who are going to grow up and become teenagers, and they're going to have cars. Do the math. They're going to be traveling on Fish Road and Sousa Road. Do the math. Accidents. You said you have data that said there were 32 accidents over, what, a 7-year period? And you said that was inconsequential. I think Tiverton residents think one accident is too many. Not inconsequential at all. You have on Main Road 3 entrances. They're right piled on top of each other. Basically, it's one. You have one on Sousa, 140 units. Okay. You've driven. How annoyed did you get when you had to sit in a queue of cars for 5 minutes trying to make a right and left-hand turn to get out of your house? And what happened when you got on the road? You didn't behave. You were pissed. The other day, I followed a school bus. I didn't follow it. I was approaching it when it changed from its stop to its go. Behind it, I counted 49 cars. They went basically from the post office down the hill, almost to Sousa Road. This is going to be daily. Now, I get it, probably the school bus is going to go into your development and pick up the kids there and come back. I hope that's the plan. Parking. Will it be part of the HOA rules that you cannot park on the main thoroughfares? Yes, no. You don't know.
I'm assuming I have a chance to address all the questions later.
Okay, well, we'll do it that way.
There's several here that.
So, yeah, there's parking, but when I looked at those drawings, it looked to me like you might get 1.5 cars in any particular unit's driveway, but what about the other 1 or 2 or maybe 3? They're gonna park, and they're gonna park at home, and they're gonna wanna park on those roads. That needs to be considered. If the HOA rules say, no, you can't do that, you enforce them, then that's one thing. What's gonna happen when we now have a ladder truck? This thing's big. If it goes into that lower section, traffic will come to a stop. They'll fight the fire. People will see that fire. They can almost touch the house next door. They're gonna wanna leave. They're not gonna be able to. It's gonna be a mess. You need to think about all these things. Granted, traffic studies, you know, they use algorithms and they use this and they use that. But us in this room, we use the experience of living here. What is Tiverton like? I just have a big problem with your traffic study. And if you did it in December like you did, there's no traffic in December. But there is from, let's say, April to September, especially in the summer. There's a lot of it. And the one that was done in 2020, when was that done? You need to do these things during peak times, not during the, slender times and then adjust them. I'm done.
So Todd, would you like to respond to Mr. Edwards? Okay, and then for each person who gets up to ask questions, you can respond to them. Okay. Individually.
So hopefully I got all of these. So maybe I wasn't clear on the reduction actually was a comparison from our original traffic report to the new supplemental memo. That's not the actual total, obviously, there's not going to be a reduction of trips from the development. That's just a comparison from the reduction of units. So I apologize for not being clear about that. So there obviously will be a lot of traffic, a lot of trips. There's not going to be a reduction due to the development.
Reduce the units by 30.
Yes.
You said that would reduce the trip by 17.
Well, it was 5 in the AM peak hour and 12 in the PM peak hour. So for those 2
I
hours.
ask you again, do these people not work? Do they not go to work? Do they not take kids to
So-
school?
so the-
Do they
the-
not go to the grocery store? Do they carpool?
So the trip generation, the calculations that we use, that is a standard in the industry for all traffic engineers use, is based on thousands of studies that have been done across the country, at all different places. So and that's the data that's provided. I know personally, like my wife and I have a son that drives, we don't all leave at the same time. Someone might leave at 7, someone might leave at 8:30. There's all different times. It's not all concentrated in a very short time. It's spread out during those peak periods. So and again, the data is based on thousands of studies, thousands of counts that have been done. In terms of delay at the driveways, the level of service at the driveways are actually not that high. The delays are actually short. There won't be minutes waiting. There'll be, actually I can probably, so you're talking, so it's a matter, at the driveways, the highest is 17 seconds on average during the, actually, I'm sorry, that's not even the right one. Yeah, so you're talking about less than 20 seconds of delay to get in and out of the driveway. So it's not going to be a long time based on the traffic that's on the driveways and the traffic that's on Sousa and Fish Road. The school buses, I think what you mentioned, that's something that's going to happen whether this development is here or not. If there is, that, I don't know why there'd be 49 buses or 49 cars behind the bus. But that's not something that this development would have impact on, obviously. For the parking, I don't know if, Chris, if you have an answer to that one in terms of,
Streets were designed for large main roads with parking on the main roads for overflow.
okay. And to follow it up, we did do turning movements with the ladder truck. Actually, we used a ladder truck that Portsmouth has that Tiverton uses. I don't know if Tiverton got a new ladder truck in that time.
Yeah, we have now.
Right, but in any case, the truck that we use is actually larger. We did get the dimensions from Tiverton Fire Department. So we did use something actually slightly bigger than what they have. And they can make all the maneuvers in the site. So that shouldn't be an issue. In terms of an actual fire that they're fighting, like they obviously the fire department will take whatever space they need to do that. If they take the road and cars have to go around, that's just part of what happens, and hopefully it doesn't happen very often. And then the December counts, I think I had mentioned earlier, based on our analysis, looking at those counts that they were done in May of 2019, the volumes in December actually were higher. And so, you know, and that also was 4 years previous too.
Thank you, Todd. And just let me just say to Chris, I may well have misunderstood the plans. You're telling me that virtually all of the driveways are off the alleyways, not the roads on the interior. But that's another reason why we need something big enough so that we can see where things are, particularly in phase one, which is way denser than particularly in phase two, which is way denser than phase one. So I really hope that we can get a really nice big plan of the footprints of all of the buildings and all of the alleyways and all of the interior streets, so that we can see where things are. Because I you know, even with my glasses, I'm having trouble reading the plans.
So that would be all fine and well, but contextually it'll be difficult. So we can give you snapshots in a certain area that is crystal clear, but then how does that relate to the next spot? In order for us to give you, like, we're happy to do that, right? But if we were to give you that kind of detail, the size of the plan would go from that end of the room to that end of the room, right? So we can give you snapshots of it so you can say, show me this area, right? And we can blow that up and we can put it up there and you can see that, right? Or if you pick 3 areas, 4 areas, 5 areas,
Right.
whatever. But to say, like, we want to see the whole plan in that size,
Yes.
very difficult to do.
Mr. Hardy, maybe I can help you. I'm not sure we have it on that plan, but a very similar development is proceeding in another municipality. And Union Studios did renderings of, this is a walkable neighborhood where front porches are gonna face front porches and there are no driveways. That's part of the attraction of the development. But they did and I don't think I've seen it on this one. They would take your streets and then do a plan that shows, okay, here's the end of your front porch. This is how much till you get to the sidewalk. Then there's an area for street trees, and then there's an area for a car to park, and then here's the street right of way, and then it has the house on the other side of the street whose front porch is facing it. And they did that at the entrance, and they did that at selected locations. And you've got these blocks that repeat themselves over and over and over again. So if we take a typical block and say, okay, here's what's going on in that block, and by the way, that's what's going on in this one, this one, this one, and this one, because they're all basically the same.
Right.
I think what Chris, because Tom Principe tells us that every time we ask him about this, it may be more of a Union Studios thing with less engineering details. Tom's plans end on one page in the middle of something that you gotta pick up the next page, and it's very
Okay.
tedious to understand it. The Union Studios is a little easier to
That
blow up.
would work for me, and it's easier to read this for me, because I'm not an engineer, than to read the actual plan. So if you could do something like that, but I think what everybody in this room would like to see is how close together are these buildings going to be? Because it looks to me like when you lost 11 acres because of the wetlands, you took the same number of units and squoze them together into a much smaller, oh no, that's exactly what you did, Chris.
Well, I would challenge you, sir, to go back in and look at the pre-post, and you'll see that that is not true.
I have done that, and I do recall, and I went through the minutes, and I recall that when we made our, when we granted a density bonus to this project, it was based on more buildable acres than you have now. And the buildings, according to the plans that I have, the buildings were spread out more and not together. But
We
Chris,
just went into other areas. I mean,
if we do what Mr. Landry is suggesting, and maybe have Union Studio show us what particularly Phase 2 will actually look like in terms of how much space is between the buildings, that would satisfy me at least. So I think that,
we can easily do that.
Janice, does that make sense for you?
It does.
Because I think most of us are really concerned about that.
I was just thinking that if we could have one page of just Phase 1 and another page. I was thinking if we could have one page with Phase 1 on it and another page with Phase 2, it would give us more eye space to see what's going on.
We can do that, enlarge those so they're easier to see, but then
Right.
drill down into typical areas that repeat themselves and have smaller areas with us showing maybe 10 units or 12 or 15, whatever, to give you
Right.
a more precise.
Right.
Well, one
idea.
page of that, but I think if we could see both phases,
Right.
Yeah.
that would,
And the integration is also important too, Bill, in my mind.
The affordable housing integration, we were very clear on that in the application all the way through, that every unit type, and there are several, will have a 25% representation. So for every 4 of this unit, there'll be 1 affordable.
Right, but the placement of it.
Presented
And
that
he-
in the previous submission.
He did, and they actually did a detail, a sheet that explained how every unit would be allocated. Now, someone can go put a little asterisk or a number or something on the,
aren't they color-coded?
I'm not sure all right, so I remember when we were preparing our submission, we paid special attention to that because it's in your local ordinance as a
Right.
requirement. And and that was certified as complete because, I do remember Union Studios having some kind of a keyed, okay.
If that's the latest
Okay.
deck from them,
Yes, it
you'll
is.
have one of the sheets in there that shows
The
delineation of every single unit spread out through.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So we're still doing traffic. We have not yet gone to landscaping. And I saw your hand up, Carol Herman, before Renee. But, so it's Carol Herman and then Renee, no.
I was interrupted because we were talking about affordable housing, and I have a concern about the affordable housing, but I'm going to stick to traffic.
Oh, okay, we'll get back to you later on that.
Someone in the back right corner as well.
Do you mean waving of you? I
Oh,
also have my
have-
hand up, so I just wanted
But you're next after Carol. I couldn't see you because the podium blocks my sight.
Carol Herman. I live on Main Road, just south of the F-rated intersection at Sousa, Main, and Schooner. I heard the traffic engineers state that morning traffic tends, or is the issue, because commuter traffic and school traffic coincide, whereas they do not in the evening. Well, any of us who live in Tiverton and travel Main Road know that while that may be true elsewhere in the world, it is certainly not true for our little part of the world. Main Road experiences the heaviest traffic congestion starting at about 3:15 on weekdays and extending for at least an hour. And this is because we have the conjunction of school buses with people doing their errands and going shopping and going to the bank and going to the pharmacies. So the fact that no traffic study focused on that period of time, because most of the world doesn't have problems that period of time, is an issue. The buses, as Mr. Edwards said, traffic can back up 49 cars deep. And whereas the traffic engineer may say, well, that was true now and it'll be true later, it's going to be worse if they build 275 units, because we need to think about how many additional school buses will be backing up traffic on Fish and Main roads after it's built. I also took exception to his comment that it's an F-rated intersection now, and it will still be an F-rated intersection after they build their 275 units, and therefore it will have no impact. I'm a teacher. There's a difference between an F, where a student earns 55 out of 100 possible points, and an F, where a student earns 10 out of a possible 100 points. And the worse the F is in terms of an intersection, the more people are going to experience accidents and injuries. And that is a significant impact on our health and safety.
So, Tab, would you like to respond to that, or wait?
So, again, I guess I was not clear. So we counted the traffic during those times that you mentioned, but the peaks are later in the afternoon. So that's just purely what the traffic counts show. And that's pretty universal in most areas, that the peak in the afternoon is later in the afternoon.
Stop. Right? Buses stop.
They-
Normal traffic doesn't.
Yes. So in terms of, the level of service is, as I said, it is F, and there would be a slight increase in delay for that intersection. But again, based on the crash data, it does not seem to be, and I know it was mentioned, one accident is too many, and I agree with that. It would be great if we had no accidents. But there are crashes, obviously, and it does, in this area, it is not a significant number when you look at overall the number of crashes that occur. So.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Now, we had somebody over here on the right-hand side. Yeah. So please speak clearly into the microphone. You might want to take your mask off, and tell us your name and your address, please.
I will do that.
We're on TV.
Yes. My name is Deborah Gee, and I live at 15 Evans Avenue in Tiverton. I am looking at a number of issues, but I will speak on the traffic issue because what has been said already is basically in my area of expertise as well, because on Evans Avenue, when the bus situation was, they stopped on Main Road, with the pandemic, we've started to go down and pick up students along the way, but people would pick up their students at the top of the street or drop them off at the top of the street. So if you're talking about Sousa Road, there are a lot of people who also don't use the buses and take their child to school. But so during that period of time, you're going to have a very congested area. whether you're going into the development or you're parking a bus outside that is, now has more cars parked there waiting for their child to get off so they don't have to walk anywhere in the rain and that kind of thing. So you're working on that kind of a situation. I don't know if you've said in the past or whatever, but I have a real problem with 275 units when I don't know how many, if you have a townhouse, how many does that mean you can have in a townhouse versus the high-rise that's going to have smaller numbers, but 275. I'd like to know how many people are going to be in this development. Are we having lights? Are we having, are the roads going to be wide enough? And I'm sorry, we have teenagers who will also have cars besides mom and dad having cars. So you have to take that all into consideration as you move along. I think this alleyway parking area becomes an issue when someone moves in and decides, as having someone who has people living around me, where they decide they rather park on the street because it's closer to the front door to bring their groceries in or whatever. So you end up with a lot more congestion than I think you might have based on the number of cars within an area. On Main Road with bus stops, and when we get to, you already mentioned, I'm very happy because I see that you are hitting a lot of, Stu, you're hitting a lot of the things that I'm worried about. And, but I also noticed that there are 2 other developments that may be going in there that are going to be dropping off onto Main Road. And everybody needs to go to the public places that they do their business, whether it be going to the post office or so on and so forth. So even if you've got these extra places on Fish Road, I think that you're going to find that most people are going to be heading off and up and down Main Road, which is already very congested. Trying to get out of Evans Avenue has become a very big issue. So I'm finding that what I'm looking at for what's being proposed, not just with this one, but with the other 2 and a garage, a Seasons gas station and market, you're going to have such congestion in that area that we all might as well stay home. But thank you.
So Todd, did you want to respond to that in any way?
Oh, thank you.
So one thing I just wanted to point out again, the trip duration document that I referenced before, that is done all over the place and all the same kind of developments, single families or townhouses, duplexes, apartments, and they are the same type of developments as would be in here. So it does account for having multiple people, including teens, living and having cars in those units.
Thank you, Ted. I see several hands up. I'm not sure. I think.
There's another one here.
Okay, could you? What? So one. So you're next then. You're next.
Hi, I'm Gail Lawrence, and I live at 108 Long Pasture Way in the southern part of Tiverton. And I am grateful for that as I listen to this. I do frequent the shops in the northern part, and I would like to echo everything that's been said about the hazards that currently exist in terms of traffic flow, times when the school buses are causing big delays for people. People tend to be a little less patient with such delays when it's at the end of the workday. So I think in terms of public safety, that point was made. I also come off 24 to Fish Road, and when I do that, I head south. But I'm now curious if the traffic engineers have examined how that intersection will be impacted at various times of day with increased numbers of people, leaving the main highway to come into our community. And maybe you can respond to that. And then the Four Seasons project, I have to confess, I don't know how likely that is for our town, but that too is going to be in this same area. And I did send a letter, email actually, expressing my concerns about that, because I think that's a hugely impactful project. And if all of these come together at the same time, I definitely will be going out of town in other directions rather than to my frequent places north that currently I use those, the post office and the shops. So that's just my personal concern, but I think it's a broader concern for the quality of life, for all the pedestrians, for the residential people who have long established homes there. Mrs. Gee from Evans Road, I mean, I can commiserate with that because I've been on a side street waiting to get out of CVS and no school bus. So I appreciate the depth of thought and consideration that you're giving to this very large, impactful project. And then on a note, not about traffic, but I happen to also be involved with the Open Space Commission, and Pecasset Ridge is the name of the conservation area in our community. So I think Pecasset Ridge would be an appropriate choice.
Thank you, Gail, and I'm going to call on Todd, but I'd just like to caution anybody in the audience, we're here to talk about this particular project, which is now called Tiverton Heights, and we should not be referring to any other matter or application coming before the planning board. I would say that. And then the second thing I'd like to remind the audience of is that that we take developments one at a time, and this development has been before the planning board for a long, long time, and we cannot hold them accountable for developments that have come in after they have come into the planning board. So that's just, that's just a matter of fairness to them. So if a development like the villages at Mount Hope Bay preceded them, then when we get to a traffic analysis, we can require them to take that into account, but we can't require them to take into account things that happened after they filed their application. Did I get that right, Todd?
Precisely.
Well, fair enough. But as Jane Q. Citizen,
Yeah.
I'm just taking a more holistic approach.
But taking a
And I appreciate
taking a holistic approach, I know, and we've had discussions about that, and we hope that the town, understands what's going on in the whole neighborhood. Todd, would you like to respond?
And I'm not trying to pick on you. And you're in the queue, and you have a right to be there. I'm not trying to make a problem, but you can appreciate this concern.
Thank you.
So, Fish Road. I'll trade please.
Route 24 and Fish Road, that was not included in our study area. It is a little further away, obviously, from the development than the intersections we looked at. But I would point out that the intersection of Sousa and Fish Road does have a good level of service at that location that's closer to the development.
Thank you, Todd.
You read my mind. I was going to warn the board about seasons.
No, we don't. I'm very sensitive about that topic, as you may know. Yes. So if you could just mention your name and where you live.
Mention it.
And speak loudly.
Sure. My name is Jamie French, and I live on Hobson Avenue. I'm sorry I'm late tonight. I had forgotten about this meeting because it wasn't on Tiverton Happenings like the other ones have been, so that people would be aware of the meeting tonight. And so I'd like to speak generally about zoning because it affects all of the developments. And I grew up here in Tiverton in the North End, when it was farmland. And the North End is just as historic as the south end is, except that Tiverton has chosen to sell us off and not allow us the status that we should have. Back in the 60s, I remember we wanted to have the same zoning throughout all of Tiverton, and we were not allowed to have that because there was a plan to sell off the north end. And you can see that, and in the comprehensive community plan that was adopted by Tiverton in 2018. There's maps. The current, let me read this. I call it a quiet rezoning of Tiverton. And the future land map, which is figure 5.4, indicates that north of Booger Marsh Road will be densely developed. The map needs to be, I figured this map needs to be nullified. Densely developed means less than 1/8 of an acre per unit. Now, you guys have figured out that we can pay for the sewers to go in. I mean, we paid for the sewer to go up Sousa Road, right? We paid for the trunk line. We paid the Bow House and those condos, when they got their sewer, they got a free ride because their property taxes went toward the sewer, but now anyone who is mandated to be on the sewer has to pay if it goes by their house. So basically, we're paying for this, but what we're doing, bringing it in for future development, because with the quiet rezoning of the future map, 5.4, it shows that the whole north end, the whole northwest end will be densely populated. And the whole northeast side is more than 1/8 of an acre per unit. That also is multifamily, whereas it remains 2 acres for the south side. Now, I think that's a little bit unfair. I consider that redlining in Tiverton. I consider that we have been sold off and we've been treated unfairly.
If I could just interrupt, be impolite and interrupt you.
Yes.
But it would be nice if you would address your comments to the application at hand.
The application, as I say, I think that right now, everything should be just put on hold, because I think that the quiet rezoning of Tiverton is an illegal action and should be nullified. The maps that we had previously, the 2011 land map, shows a much denser population than what is reality. I mean, it shows that Summerfield Lane is what, an 1/8 to 1/4 acre lots, or is it 1/4? I mean, and it's not true. I mean, it's the lots that all came into Tiverton back in the 50s are 1/4 acre or more, but they're on the map. It densely shows it as an 1/8 of an acre, and so the maps are wrong. And so I think that and you hear from all these people it says in the comprehensive plan that we look at Tiverton as a rural community. Well, it's not a rural community when you zone the entire north end of Tiverton at 1/8 of an acre, more or less, for multi-unit housing. And so that is not consistent with the comprehensive community plan, which is a Rhode Island law.
So are you saying that this particular application is putting too many buildings on too little space?
I'm saying that if you wouldn't build it on the south side of Tiverton, then don't build it on the north side, because we are not here to be sold off.
Right.
And it seems,
But this is the wrong body to be addressing
well,
zoning
why
issues
is that? Because this is the planning board, and the planning board was the one who put together the comprehensive community plan and adopted it. In fact, if I believe you were in charge of that committee, weren't you?
Not really, but zoning, the planning board does play a bit of a role in zoning, but it's actually the town council who adopts.
Right, but that was
zoning ordinance.
presented to them.
That's, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I think that we're here to talk about traffic impacts right now. We're talking about
Of course it's
traffic.
going to impact us. We have, the main road can't accommodate, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the schools, we don't have the fire department, we don't have the police department. All development costs the taxpayer money. It doesn't provide a tax relief, it costs the taxpayer money. We are going to have to provide more of everything. Our taxes will go up. Main Road will be unusable. What happens if all of a sudden you now decide that you have to expand Main Road and you have to take all those nice houses out? And what happens if you have to remove the Osborne district? I mean, it's like, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely, it just has to at one point stop. I mean, if it was larger units, but you can't, this I mean, you don't even have anything in the comprehensive plan protecting wetlands. There could be one sentence in there that says that you can't develop wetlands.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off. You've taken as
Thank
much
you.
time as anybody.
Thank you.
And we do have other people who want to be heard. And we have another presentation to be made and then comments on that presentation. So thank you
Yes.
very much.
And thank you.
And is there anybody else in the audience who would like to ask Todd Brayton questions about traffic? I don't see any hand. Oh, yes, Deb. Deb Janik is a member of the Town Council.
Thanks, Stu. Just not to beat a dead horse, but I just wanted to let you know that I have, as a town council member, received numerous text, emails, phone calls. People are concerned about traffic. People are concerned about congestion, accidents, concerned about the number of children who may be in these developments. I do believe that at some point we had said, not for this development, but the number of children, school age, would be something around 2.5 per household, kind of an average, and that was much higher than the number that was quoted the last time we were here. We were talking something like 50 children. Our schools can't support even 50 more children, and I believe it to be much, much more than that, with way more school buses, more traffic. And if they're soccer parents like I was in and out of my house multiple times every day going to practice. So this is what I'm hearing from the residents of town, their concerns. So, thank you.
And I have one other hand up here. Yes, yes. I see it.
Good evening. My name's Michael Turner. I'm from Randolph Ave, Tiverton. Excuse me. I moved here to Tiverton 20 years ago on Randolph Ave. And when I first moved here 20 years ago, I could drive up to the top of my street and there'd be no traffic. When I was working, 7 in the morning. Now I drive up to the top of my street at 5 in the morning because I wake up early, my back is hurting, I'm moving around, I get up, I gotta move. 5 in the morning, I go up to the top of my street now, I can't pull out. If I go up there at 7, there's buses and, people were parking at the top of my street, having their kids sitting in their vehicles. Fire trucks are going by, buses are going by, I can't even start. They're on both sides of the street, the kids are playing in the street, and I can't get to the stop sign. I did stop, then I pull out, a cop pulls me over. A Tiverton police officer pulls me over saying I didn't stop. I can't stop. The cars are right up to the stop sign. There's kids running around. I did stop and try to look. There's fire trucks going by. And for 20 years, the traffic has not gone from nothing, or practically nothing, at 7, 8 in the morning, to I can't pull out at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 a.m., okay? You try pulling out any time there's a bus. There's more than 49 cars. I've been down to the highway, and the bus has been up. It had to pull over, has to keep pulling over. It stops at every road along the path. They have one on one side, one on the other side. It stops at every road. When I was a kid, I used to have to walk a half mile in the freezing cold and sit and wait for the bus. These kids sit in their parents' cars at every street. The bus stops at every street up the road. The traffic is from one end to the other end on both sides at, 7:30, at 8:30, 9 o'clock a.m. That's stuck. You can't move. Then, right, at 4 o'clock, same thing. The buses are dropping off kids. Parents are waiting for their kids at the top of the street. I can't even stop at the stop sign. There's kids running around. It's going to be in that intersection, Sousa Road is a dangerous intersection. I've been driving that down there for 20 years. Almost hit people coming out of Schooner since they built Schooner. Almost people pulling out. People don't want to wait. I have to wait at the top of my street 20 minutes. I live near Humphreys and the post office and the CV. There used to be a Grand Central there. There used to be no traffic when I first moved here. I loved this town. It was great. Sunsets, no traffic. Now I go to the top of my street, I'm waiting 20, maybe even over 20 minutes. I can't see putting in 170 units anywhere in North Tiverton and expecting my life, my quality of life to be better. And it's going to cost us money. It's right. It's going to be more ambulances, more police, more cops, more everything. It's going to cost me money for them to make money, okay? And I don't feel like footing the bill. We need town sewage. We need different things other than 170, 100, 200 in North Tiverton. It's packed. I'm waiting 40 minutes to get out of my street. When I first moved here, I loved it. I loved it here. Now it's like, I want to move out. I'm stuck here. I don't want to live here anymore.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay,
And would anybody, Todd, I'm not sure that this is on traffic so much as just general impact of the project, so I don't see anybody. I do see somebody who wants to have, to make a comment. Yes, could you come forward?
Susan Anderson, Main Road. I'm also south of that notorious intersection. I have two questions. In your report, you say the peak AM and peak PM hours. I would like to know what those hours are. Because it wasn't specified as to what exactly those hours were. The other question I have regards the school buses. I see school buses on Main Road and Fish Road stop on those streets, and then the kids are either walking or in their parents' cars or vice versa from the neighborhoods and back. On Fish Road, it's Cottrell, so the people, the kids that live in Cottrell, the school bus stops there, and then they all are in there. So why is the school bus not just going to stop on Fish and on Sousa for this development? Why is it going into the developments? Personally, I can't see that a school bus would do that. I think that they would stay on the main road like they are on Main and Sousa. Main and Fish for the other developments. So that was a question as to, do you actually know that the school bus is actually going to go in there? Or is it just going to stop on those two main roads? That was my question.
Excuse me. So the first one, I can let you know the exact peak hours based on the traffic counts. So for Main Road, Sousa Road, and Schooner Drive, the AM peak hour was 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And the PM peak hour was 3:45 to 4:45. And then in terms of the buses, yeah, we have no input on where they stop. That we just we're looking at if they decide to go into the development, can they make those maneuvers? That's going to be up to, I would assume, the school board or the schools themselves. I don't actually know who makes those decisions, but that wouldn't be us making those decisions as to where the bus stops are.
Yeah, that's an interesting issue, because typically in town, the school buses simply stop at the intersections. They don't go down the side streets. So when they're on Main Road, for example, they never leave Main Road. They just stop at the intersection, and sometimes, the gentleman said Randolph, lives on Randolph, a huge number of kids get on and off school buses on Randolph. I know, because I live in that same neighborhood, down at the bottom of that hill. And so that would be an issue, I think, because Phase 2 does have 146 units, and so that could be a lot of kids. But again, as you point out, Todd, that's something maybe that the school department needs to look at. Actually, you've already spoken, and
When I was young, school buses did not, they went off of Main Road.
yeah,
They went into the parking lots of the stores, so that traffic could go. So where,
Thank you.
Dollar General
But
is-
I would really like to hear the presentation on landscaping now, if there. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you speaking to traffic now?
Tangentially, I would guess.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Sarah Troba, Bridgeport Road. Just from some of the comments, it's stimulated a question in my mind. I don't know if it's strictly traffic, but it just has to do with the idea of whose idea was how many units there are going to be, and why are there so many? Is this something the town wants because it's of a benefit to the town? Or is it something that the developers want to pack as many units in as they can to profit from it? It seems like there's a great discrepancy here between cramming these units in, and I thought that was an excellent point about the size of a lot size for a dwelling, and the whole comprehensive plan, and how that's determined, and how it was subverted by a development. Are there stipulations in the comprehensive plan for our lovely rural town for a huge development like this?
I'd like to take a stab at answering your very good question. This particular project is called a comprehensive permit project, and it is treated a little differently under state law than a normal project, because it does include a fairly significant percentage of low and moderate income housing units. And every community in the state of Rhode Island is required to have up to 10% of their entire housing inventory designated as low and moderate income. And Tiverton is below that number, as is virtually every other community in the state. And so a comprehensive permit project helps us get to that number, and helps us have more affordable housing, which is a political imperative. And so we give it, we give something we call a density bonus. We allow a more dense development with more units on less land, because the developer has to make money, and the developer typically breaks even on the units that are designated as low and moderate income. So the developer has to make his profit, because we are a capitalist country and companies have to make a profit. they have to make their profit on the so-called market rate units, the more expensive units. So when we first dealt with this project, the developer provided us with something called a pro forma, which is a sort of a rule of thumb guesstimate on how many units he would need to, am I saying this correctly, Chris, make a reasonable profit on the project with a mix of affordable and market rate units. And then we talked about yield plans and density bonuses, and we came up with the number of 275 units. But we made it clear that when we approved that as part of the master plan, we made that clear in our conditions that that number might be reduced at a later date if there was a compelling reason or reasons to reduce that number of units for human health and safety, for example, for because Tiverton's infrastructure, water infrastructure, for example, is not designed for that many units, and so on and so forth. So we're still in that process, and so there's nothing guaranteed about 275 units. That number may change if there are compelling reasons to change that number. But to answer your question very simply, and I'll ask Chris too if he has anything he'd like to add, this is a special kind of a project. Most of our projects are subdivisions where every unit is market rate. This is a comprehensive permit project, so it's special and it has special rules meant to facilitate it. So did you want to say something?
I just want to add that a lot of this project is statutorily driven, in particular the density and what has to be permitted for this project, because it is a comprehensive permit. It has its own chapter in the general laws.
So Chris, did you want to say anything, or did I get it right? Okay.
Could I just piggyback two
Yes.
comments on that?
Yes, you may.
Number one, I'm thinking of, I volunteer down at the Union Public Library, so I'm at Four Corners weekly, and people...
Thought you looked familiar.
Oh, yeah. And I curate the books. There's just general discussion and acknowledgement that since the pandemic in the past couple of years, you know, the traffic situation, just going through Four Corners, more traffic, faster. And that's just that little area, and it's all spread out down, you know, Little Compton. It's not this compressed hundreds of units, how many people, how many cars. So just that relatively minor, small, proportionate amount has caused a significant impact to just the nature of being down there. Much busier in just a year or two. And secondly, you know, I appreciate what you say, you know, all the stuff on paper, but I have to say I'm cynical, because just in this meeting, 3, 4, 5 people have taken exception to the numbers that they've provided for traffic and the impact. And people have said, I don't think so. So cynically, I really wonder about, oh, they have to have this many units to break a profit. And I wonder if you've seen how those numbers actually sort out in terms of accepting them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay.
Renee, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up a point here because you're
Okay.
talking about the comprehensive. Renee Jones, Highland Road. You're talking about the number of units that have to be affordable because of the comprehensive plan. But in a way, what I feel is like we're chasing our tail, because what happens is you will have X number of new households in here, that will increase the number of households we have, so then our 10% has to be more. So we're chasing our tails. There's got to be a way of, slowing this down somehow, because we're just adding more households, so our 10% becomes more. So, I know there are projects like fee in lieu. I'm starting to look into that to see if we can do something other than always allowing the maximum number of houses and doing our percentage. So I think we need to be a little bit more innovative in terms of how we approach this 10% deal. And the other thing I wanted to comment on, and that was because he was talking about low-income and moderate-income housing. I know a lot of times those are used for people who have some kind of physical handicap. And as somebody who has worked with people who have handicaps, I'm surprised that some of these units are in, the affordable housing units are in the buildings that are 3-story walk-ups. For people who have some kind of physical handicap who might be looking for a lower moderate housing unit, they should not be in 3 or 4 3-story walk-ups. That just doesn't work. And so I think they need to be a little bit more sensitive to that as well.
Thank you, Renee. So I think we're ready now to go on to a presentation on landscaping. We all have a new landscaping plan. I hope all members of the planning board have the new landscaping plan. Here it is, right here. That was put together by Principe Engineering. And we have Karen Beck, who will be explaining that to us. And then we'll open it up for questions and comments. Yeah, and if anybody in the audience would like to come up and sort of stand behind us so that you can see what Karen is presenting on the plan, you're more than welcome to do so. It would be nice to start using this screen behind my head.
We used to have one out.
Yeah, there is an easel, there it is over there, it's being used. Something else. I think we can control. State housing. Too many cars, too many things changed. So Karen, if you could point out the 2 phases, maybe just start with that basic, because I'm not sure everybody understands. Everybody in the audience should know that when RIDEM granted the wetland permit, they did require that there be a separation. So instead of having one integrated development, we now have a development with 2 separate and discrete phases.
Why would they do that? Why would they separate?
Because of Sin and Flesh Brook and the need to stay away from that stream.
Sorry.
So go right ahead, and we can follow up at the table here. We can follow because we've got the full plans.
Okay, so to begin with, my name is Karen Beck. I'm a registered landscape architect with Principe Engineering of Tiverton, Rhode Island. The project in front of you, I was not initially involved with. I've just been with Principe Engineering for a little over a year. But prior to that, I was at Commonwealth Engineers for more than 33 years. So I have a very deep background, almost 40 years of experience in landscape architecture, permitting, and with these types of projects. This particular project, as was mentioned, originally was able to connect the 2 phases, but through the DEM freshwater wetlands permitting process, we had to separate to 2 phases. This here, off of Fish Road, is Phase 1. The second phase is off of Sousa, I believe, yes.
Sousa.
Yeah, Sousa.
Correct.
So this first plan is an overview so that you can get a sense of where the roadways are and where the trees are. There are several different goals that are part of providing a landscape plan for a development such as this. We look at street trees because obviously we have new vehicular passageways through the area, new pedestrian passageways. So we're looking at street trees. This particular area has a lot of wetlands throughout it, so there is a lot of areas that are going to remain wooded. And the development does take advantage of the fact that because they had to weave its way through these wetland areas, you don't have many straight streets. They do curve throughout the development. In particular, Phase 1 does have that nice curved road. And we're looking at providing street trees to replace trees that are being removed as part of the development, clearing in order to install the streets as well as the buildings, et cetera. In doing that, we're looking at several different things. One, obviously, we're looking for shade. We're looking for wildlife habitat replacement. We're looking to make sure that the deer don't eat the trees. We're looking to make sure that the trees don't impact the utilities, whether they're above ground or below ground. And we're looking at aesthetics. So the majority of the trees that we're proposing in this development, we did pay very close attention, quite frankly, to the fact that you have developments that would propose all of the same type of street tree on one street. The problem with that is we have a number of diseases and pests that impact our trees. The elms are probably the best example. Dutch elm disease basically wiped out all of our street trees. This particular proposal, I take all of the trees, and there are no 2 trees of the same species that are next to one another. So in any portion of this development, you're going to have, if there's a pest or a disease or something like that that comes through the development, it's not going to wipe out all of the trees in the development. It's not even going to wipe out 2 trees that are next to one another, because you have very rare instances where a particular pest or particular disease is impacting multiple species at the same time. So again, we're replacing trees that are being removed, but we're looking at making sure that we have shade for the residences as well as the streets. And we don't have problems with the utilities, we don't have problems with deer eating them, and we don't have problems with diseases or pests impacting the majority of the trees on a particular street. The remaining pages in the submission look at the in greater detail. So we have to, again, pay attention to where the driveways are, where the light poles are, where the utilities are. So we try to input the trees to the greatest density that we possibly can, but we can't plant over a water line. We can't plant over a sewer line. We have to pay attention to where the drainage lines are and where the lights are so that we don't impact the light levels on the streets as we're impacting, putting the trees along the edges of the roadways. So all of these additional pages take all of these individual areas. The first one, as I said, was a key plan to give you an overall sense of where the street trees are being installed, but the other plans are at a greater detail so that you can see, I had to avoid a driveway, I had to avoid a light pole, and I'm trying to get the greatest density that I can, but I'm limited because I have to avoid these other things that are required as part of the development. So the street trees, again, are a mix of different types of trees. I'm looking at shade trees. I'm also looking at aesthetics in terms of, you know, when do things bloom? Does it have a flower? Does the leaves have a different color? So it's a mix of native species, which have higher wildlife value, as well as non-native species that are not invasive, but have good deer resistance and do something different. for example, a cherry tree that has flowers at a certain time of year, or a type of tree that has really good fall foliage. So I'm looking at those things too, so that the residents in the area do get something of benefit from the street trees besides shade or wildlife habitat value. The other things that I'm looking at are the drainage facilities. So we have fencing that we're showing around the drainage facilities, and we're also proposing shrubs in those areas, again, to enhance the area. It's a protective measure to put the fencing in so that you don't have issues with people getting into the detention basins with a water level. Most of these are supposed to drain within 24 hours, but again, you just want to make sure that they're safe and that they can be easily maintained. So the shrubs that we're proposing are to screen those detention basins and to also have wildlife habitat value and, again, an aesthetic value in terms of flowering at a certain time or fruiting at a certain time, whether it's the spring, the summer, the fall, or the winter. The other thing that we had to pay attention to and there are a couple of different examples, are when we have residences right along Fish Road or Sousa Road, or there's a direct abutter. We wanted to make sure that we're screening so that there is a differentiation. Vegetation doesn't do a great job as far as noise attenuation is concerned, but obviously has a visual impact. So we're doing a combination of screen fencing in some areas where we have limited area to plant, but we're also proposing a arborvitae species. It's a very large arborvitae species. We know for a fact, I've used it multiple times in multiple different areas around the state, they are not eaten by the deer, so they will continue to be an evergreen species. They're going in at 6 to 7 feet. So right from the get-go, they do a very good job of screening most people standing on the ground adjacent to them. And those are proposed, as I said, in areas where we know we've got a direct abutter, that we want to make sure that there is no impact from this development to them and their existing residents, or for the new residences along Fish Road or Sousa Road to make sure that their proximity to Fish Road and the traffic on Fish Road or wherever is going to be limited from their perspective as well. So that's basically it. We do include, we've worked with a lighting specialist, so the landscape plan does show the proposed lighting, and there are details in the rear. Of the package that show the lower fencing that's going to go around the detention basin, which is more of a safety issue, the screen fencing, which is along Fish Road, and then the lighting proposed that we're showing, which is a decorative light. So we will meet the requirements in terms of dark sky compliance, but also providing enough light along the roadways for pedestrians and vehicles. And that's basically my presentation. So if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I've just got one question, then I'll open it up to the board, and then I'll open it up to the general public. Your fencing does not allow any of the smaller critters to get through. I noticed that that both types of fences that you present on the last page here, the split rail, it has wire mesh that goes right down to the ground level, and it looks to me like the 6-foot fence also pretty much goes down to the ground level. This issue has come up before the board on several occasions. Wouldn't it be better to have fencing that will keep kids from, getting into the detention ponds, for example, but will allow rabbits and, turtles and salamanders and whatever else to get through? Have you given any thought to that? I'm just thinking about the wildlife and the fact that we don't want to convenience them any more than we have to.
No, my job, I'm both a landscape architect and wetlands biologist, so I always, when I do my projects, pay attention to wildlife habitat value and where animals are coming from and going to. And in this particular instance, the screen fencing is really only along Fish Road, in very limited areas where we have restricted land, and so we don't have enough room to put in shrubbery or something like that. So it's not going to prevent most areas as far as wildlife crossings in those areas. It's unlikely. They're definitely going to be able to move around those areas, and again, it's only in very restricted areas where we have limited room. For a screen fence, you want to be able to go from a visual height, so say 6 feet, down to the ground, because that also works on noise attenuation. If you allow, you raise it up from the ground, the noise can get underneath it. So that's what's important as far as the screen fencing is concerned. As far as the fencing that goes around the detention basins, there's no reason why we couldn't raise up the bottom of the wire. Again, this is just kind of an illustrative example to show you what we're proposing, so that it's rural in nature in terms of the type of fencing, but also does do a good job for protecting from kids, et cetera. So we can raise up that bottom elevation to make sure that rabbits, turtles, et cetera, can get underneath. That's not a problem.
Okay, good. Keep that in mind, please.
Absolutely.
And now, anybody else? I think Rosemary has a question or a comment.
I do, Karen. You talk about the screening. I presume that's this.
Speak into the
I'm sorry.
mic and
I'm sorry
be
again.
loud.
Okay, you talk about the screening. That I presume it's for those people on Sousa Road. What about the abutters to the north? Will they be screened up there, putting in arborvitae screening up there? Because we have several abutters to the north of the project.
Right, so on phase 1, there's a very large wetland area that's between any of the residences and the north. So there's no screening proposed because, quite frankly, there's probably 300, 400 feet of wetland between the proposed residences and the northern property line. So
No fencing, nothing up on the northern border?
nope. And as far as the phase 2 area is concerned, there's an electric easement between the property on that area there and the proposed residences. Again, it doesn't seem to make much sense due to the distance between the proposed residences and the property line to try to install fencing or to install screen plantings. We looked at it. The 2 areas that are definitely proposed is the residences on phase 1 that are directly along Fish Road. That's where we either have screen plantings or screen fencing. And then the other area is along the western border of the project where the detention basin that's proposed comes very close to the property line. So that's, again, where we're proposing to put in some screen plantings to screen the view between the neighbor and the new development.
Okay, there's a cemetery to the north, if my recollection provides me.
Right, we're not allowed to touch anything within 25 feet of it.
Right, but you won't have any fencing around that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing any other comments or questions from the board, so I'll open it up to the general public. And I see your hand, the gentleman from Randolph Avenue.
How you doing? I'm back.
Yes, we are now discussing the landscaping plan.
Yes, I have some questions. My name is Michael Turner. I live on Randolph Ave. And Randolph Ave is a hill, and water comes down the hill. And I wanted to know if there's a topical map of the region that you're building to see where the water is going to flow. Also, I'd like to bring up that your engineering company, is it behind where the Secundit vets are? Is that where your engineering company is?
Secundit Ridge Drive.
Yeah, okay.
Near
There's a holding pond back there that leaks out in people's backyards right there. It's from like the highway or there's a White House beyond 24. It's between, let's say, the animal hospital, the Secana Animal Hospital, and that restaurant, Baton Rouge or whatever it is. There's a holding pond back there that's huge, and it comes across, and it's actually broke the bank, a holding pond. It's not even high, it's not even on a hill. And it goes across, and the reason that that road's got potholes is because that water leaches through the ground, comes across Main Road, past the highway, and is very, puts potholes. That road, I ride to Grinnell's Beach every day, and it's like, do-do-do-do. And I figured out what that was. That was that holding pond leaching out. All those people in the back there have like little swamp area before they have a nice big holding pond or retaining pond, and the water comes out and leaches out under the ground and destroys the road. That's probably going to happen here. I live on Randolph Ave, it's a hill, and the house next to me is about 12 feet away from me on a hill. And their water just comes down into my property, right across my property, into my home, into my cellar. I've been complaining about it for years, and I can't, but that's what's going to happen here. We got a hill, we put 200 homes on it, retaining ponds. Where's that water going to go? It's going to go across Main Road. It's going to go across Sousa Road. That's the problem I have with this design, that there's no infrastructure to get rid of the water. It's not, I know she said it's only supposed to stay there for 24 hours, but everybody that lives in Tiverton knows that the water doesn't just stay for 24 hours. It stays for months. We have winter, we have spring, and then, okay, it might dry out in, let's say, August, and then now we have, fall, winter again.
I'll take a stab at answering that, because it's really not so much a landscaping issue as a stormwater runoff issue. The developer has received a RIPDIS permit, which is the state's permit for stormwater management to prevent runoff carrying pollutants into bodies of water, whether fresh or salt. And so they have that. And they also have to abide by something called the Stormwater Management Manual, which is very strict. It was adopted in 2015, and it's very strict. It's one of the strictest.
Is that from the DEM?
Yes, one of the strictest standards of any of the 50 states. And what we will do is we will ask our consulting engineer, which is Steer Engineering, to take a look at both, their stormwater management system, just to get a second opinion on that, keeping in mind that the town cannot second guess a state permit. If the state issues a permit, that's it, period, whether the town likes it or not. The state
Even if it does
preempts
damage to our roads?
The state preempts the town. That's how it works. But we will have Steer Engineering take a look at that if they haven't done so already.
Yeah, go.
Yes.
So you're talking about Creamer Pond and, your neighborhood on Randolph.
Yes.
Those are older neighborhoods. I'm pretty confident that these guys are gonna use state-of-the-art stormwater management and the way that they're gonna engineer the runoff from this piece of property. It's gonna be a lot different than the neighborhood that Creamer, the houses around Creamer Pond are 100 years old. Your house is
My
probably
house
50
is
or
almost
60 years
100.
old.
Yeah.
Right. So,
I
to
got
help
it.
you alleviate a little bit of that stress.
No, I got it. It's just
gonna
that,
be a-
I deal with it every day, or I deal with it every time it rains. And then I go to the beach and I see it coming across,
Right.
Main Road,
Older
okay.
system.
So then, are they gonna, there's gonna be a lot of people taking showers and, there's gonna be a lot of water.
Yeah, the showers that go through, are
Laundry,
by
showers,
the sewer
dishes.
system.
Do they come with
Runoff.
dishwashers? You know what I'm saying? There's gonna be a lot of water. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else, either on the board or in the general public, who would like to ask a question about landscaping in particular? Yes.
Jamie French on Hobson Avenue. And I assume that the contamination of that land has been taken into consideration for the stormwater management. I know that the sewer goes up, the trunk sewer line goes up there, so the normal daily use of the people will be in a sewer as opposed to a septic or any other, so we're just talking about stormwater.
Exactly, we are.
But that land was contaminated, so it is, as far as I know.
We don't think so. It was quarried. Years ago, it was quarried by the Texaco company. And they took granite blocks out, and that's when Sousa Road was built. It was actually built as Mile Road, remember that, years ago?
No.
And that road was built to carry the trucks carrying the granite down to the Sakonnet River, where they were loaded on ships and taken down to Newport. The other thing historically about that land is that in the bicentennial history of Tiverton, written in tercentennial history, written in 1936, there's references to a number of wells, 30 wells on that land that provided water for North Tiverton Fire District drinking water. Right. So they considered it back then to be clean enough for that water to be potable, for that water to be safe for people to consume. So we don't know of any contamination. I think you might be thinking of the lot right on the corner of Sousa and Main, where a tank farm existed up until maybe 2005, and that land was remediated under Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management standards. So the soil presumably is clean now, but it certainly was contaminated. But the applicant's land, I think, is pretty clean.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the contamination came and went. Okay, secondly was the, real briefly, I think you said lighting? You do lighting? And I just want to make sure that there is no light pollution, that the light doesn't leave the property, that the lights are pointed down as opposed to out, that they're pointed down, and that the lights don't go beyond the property line.
Right.
Creating, but mostly what I am interested is in the vegetation and in the landscaping. I would hope that native species would be used as opposed to non-native species. I would hope that things like the sugar maple would be used and not the Norwegian maple. The Norwegian maple should be outlawed, and that all of the planting is native species to feed our insect and pollinators, to feed our wildlife. And I don't know what is that true? Are you using native species?
I'd like to just say that, first of all, on lighting, I think everybody around this table agrees that there should not be light pollution, and I took I was very interested in the picture on the last page of this plan of the lamps that you're proposing to use. They're very attractive, and they do shoot down so that there is no so-called light pollution. That's a huge issue around town, and people complain about it all the time, particularly where gas stations are concerned. The second issue you raised, though, about native species, I have made that same argument around this table, but, you know, I think that there's a balance here. And it's also nice to have a shrubbery and trees that are flowering at different times of year than the natives do, and that provide a color mix that is a little different than what you would get with a strict native, a strict inventory of native plants.
But native
So
plants flower all throughout the season.
Well,
I mean, you have your asters ending up, and you have your...
I'm inclined to give the landscaper a little more flexibility to do what she has done in the past and has worked in other projects you've worked on. I know in my yard, I have a mix, and I'm really pleased with it because I get flowering stuff from April to October, and so it is a trade-off. I mean, in an ideal world, we might just insist on just native, but
I would hope that we would have no invasive species in that case, because we don't want, you have like something like the Norwegian maple, and then it just crowds out the native species of maple, because the Norwegian maple is so invasive, and it's being outlawed in many places. I would hope that the Rosa multiflora that's been blooming recently, which is now outlawed in Massachusetts, would not be used due to the fact that it just spreads everywhere.
Thank you.
Or like the grapes. And also, one of the problems I find with the non-native species is that they tend to need fertilizers and pesticides because they're not native. And then that washes, during stormwater events, all that fertilizer and pesticides washes eventually to the bay and into our waterways and our wetlands. And that is what causes our algae blooms. And it kills our fish, and it kills our wildlife. And with the native species, there's no need for the fertilizers and the pesticides, and it makes for a healthier environment, especially with stormwater events.
Thank you for those comments. And Karen, did you want to respond?
First and foremost, I'm a certified invasive manager with the CRMC, so I'm very much aware of what species are considered invasive and how to treat them. The list of plant materials that I'm using is approximately 85% native. However, we have to make sure that we can get enough. There's a lot of trees that are being proposed on this particular development. We have to make sure that we can put them in those quantities at a certain size. I have to make sure that they have a 6-foot bottom branch in order to make sure that people can walk underneath them. Not all of the native flowering species, trees, etc., can I get those at that size and make sure that the bottom branch is at 6 feet. So again, I'm trying to use as many native species as possible. I would never in a million years use any invasive species, and quite frankly, you can't buy Norway maple in Rhode Island or Massachusetts or basically anywhere else because it is acknowledged as a significant invasive species. So I'm not proposing any invasive species. I'm trying to use as many native species as I possibly can, but again, some non-native species that are not invasive, that have a true aesthetic or other reason, safety reason, et cetera, I'm proposing to insert those into the development for those reasons and those reasons only.
Thank you, Karen. I don't see anybody else with a comment, so I would just like to thank both Karen and Todd for their presentations and for answering questions. It was very helpful and very informative. But we do have a little bit more business to deal with the applicant. We need to continue the public hearing, and we need to also extend the time clock, which is now set to expire on August 1st. We do have a meeting coming up. Our July regular monthly meeting is July 12th, but we have a pretty crowded agenda for that meeting already. And I'm kind of the opinion, if it's okay with the applicant, that we schedule you back on the August 2nd. And by the way, that will give both the town and the applicant a little more time to tie up some of the loose ends that we talked about at the very beginning of this presentation. So that might actually work to all of our benefit. If August 2 looks okay for you, I did talk to Todd about the possibility of trying to do another special meeting, but it's really hard in the summer to get a quorum for a special meeting, and my troops are very close to mutiny right now anyhow, because we've had so many meetings. So I think that we probably will not try to go the special meeting route, because I'm not sure. I mean, even tonight, we only had a bare quorum of 5. Chris, are you agreeable to extend the time clock? And we would get you on the agenda on August 2. I think we can guarantee that pretty much. So we would need a time clock that would expire after August 2. I would personally like to see an expansion of the time clock way out to October, so we don't have to worry about it again for a while. But then you'll have to trust us that we'll keep things moving along. But it's up to you, because you make the request, Chris, and we accept the request.
Yeah, I think we usually like to jump rock to rock. I don't think I've ever declined an extension to this board on any project ever. Sometimes I find that both the applicant and the board take a little different approach when you're jumping 60 days and 90 days than they do with 30 days. You know, people don't have to do things right away. I've got a list here that took 2 yellow legal pads just tonight, taking down everybody's comments. So I think it would make sense to extend it to the end of August or to September 1st. Have the August 2nd date. Maybe some things will break down that's on the board's agenda. There may be some potential for another meeting in August, but and then if we're making progress and we're still having a communication, we would never put the board in a position of having to take a vote on something that they didn't expect to be voting on that night. So I think that would be our preference, to keep jumping rock to rock, and it's as much for the town's benefit as it is for our own and our team.
Does anybody know when the September meeting is, Ed? Do you know? It would be the first Tuesday in September. I'm just wondering if we could.
It'll be the 6th.
6th, September 6th.
It's the day after Labor Day.
Oh, no, then it's
Wednesday the
probably,
7th.
it's probably been delayed.
Wednesday the 7th is what I have.
Wednesday the 7th, really?
It's on my calendar.
Oh, boy. I've never heard of a Wednesday meeting.
For the planning board?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
September
No.
13th.
September 13, yeah, because Susan made up the calendar and she
Yeah.
always just delays a week. If it happens the day after a holiday, she'll delay it a
It's
week.
the 13th.
So that's going to be too late for you, Mr. Landry. Going after September 13 would be too long. So you can just take us to the end of August if you're comfortable with that. We'll do that.
Well, we're comfortable going to the 14th of September.
You are. Very good. That's very nice. That gives us a little more breathing room, and we promise we'll try to be timely, although it hasn't always been easy to be timely.
And that's referring really to our engineering, steer engineering.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We're on top of that, and we've had some problems, but we're resolving those problems now.
If that's all right, I'll make a motion to extend the time clock to September 14th.
And I'll second that. So we're now talking about a time clock on this project, September 14, 2022.
Any discussion?
So any discussion? I'm not seeing any discussion. All those in favor, raise their hand. I'm not going to do a roll call on this. Unanimous.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
And now, we need a motion to continue the hearing. In the hearing will be, in this instance, the hearing will be continued to the August 2nd regular monthly meeting. So I would make that motion.
I'll second it.
Rosemary seconds it. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor? 5, unanimous. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Night.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, now, the next item on our agenda is AO reports. We don't have any of those. Approval of minutes. And those of us who get hard copy minutes did not get hard copy minutes for June 7. Those minutes were actually done by Todd as, among other things, as a model for his expedited minutes, his bare bones minutes. And I actually saw those. He ran those by me. So did everybody who gets things electronically get the minutes for June 7? You did, Adam? So is everybody comfortable approving those minutes? And Rosemary and I will go along, if you're comfortable. Will you go along with that? Rosemary? Because they're really brief. I'm not sure you can. We won't have enough to approve. We need 5 votes, I think, don't we?
Yes.
Somebody here might have been absent on June 7. No? Everybody was here? Adam, you were here, Adam. I
No,
remember
Amanda
you.
was absent. I had the zoning printed for me. Amanda was absent.
Yep.
But everybody that's here
Yep.
was
I
here
saw
that
it.
day.
I think we should put prepared by who prepared it and then approved date at the end of it. That's all I.
Well, we do that when we submit it to the Secretary of State.
Well, yeah, but it should be on the one we're approving, but okay. I'm agreeable,
Okay?
sure.
So
Fine.
if everybody is agreeable to that, does anybody have any corrections to the June 7, 2022 minutes?
I do.
Yes, go ahead.
I recused myself and I left the table, or left the,
That's in there.
That's May
That's
17.
in here.
oh.
That's in there.
Yeah, but I left the table, just add, I left the table, left the dais. It's in there somewhere, but.
But you,
What the hell is it?
are you talking about June 7?
Yeah, talk about June 7th.
For one of the ERS.
Yeah. June-
Oh, for ERS, that's right,
when I
that's
recused
right, that's
myself
right,
on
for the
page-
Canon ERS.
Put the page number on here. Yeah, page 2. Board member Rosemary Eber recused herself and submitted the required recusal form and left the dais, whatever you call it.
Okay, Dick.
Where was that, Rosemary?
Middle of the page.
Did you
under
get
the-
that, Ed?
Item number 3.
Page 2.
Okay.
And,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
did I return? I didn't read it.
That was not included.
Didn't, no, she was recused, no, it just says that she was voting recused. So,
Yeah.
go back to the-
But it shows the vote for the next matter.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever you say.
Yeah, if it shows you're voting, then
All
you're
right.
back. Okay. If that's the only correction, then I think
Are you
we,
asking? She did not vote, right?
No, I
You
recused.
did not vote, yeah.
On that one, on the next
Yeah.
one, she did vote,
And then she did.
which
Yeah, then I
shows
came
she
back.
returned.
I questioned I questioned an illegal
Yeah,
subdivision.
the division.
Yep.
Subdivision.
I would make a motion to approve the June 7, 2022 minutes with the correction that Rosemary made. Do I have a second? Christine says she will second it. Any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? Okay, good.
I'm gonna correct you, that was not a correction.
It was
That
an
was an
addition.
amendment.
It was
There's no
an-
correction.
It was an
He's
addition.
perfect.
Take a vote to
It
go
was
into
an
executive
addition.
session. Yes.
So the other set of minutes we have is the May 17, 2022 minutes, and that's the meeting that I was absent and Rosemary was chairing. And I think we all have those, but
No, I
unfortunately,
didn't finish it.
No,
you distributed them.
I did?
Yeah.
You did.
That was a mis- that was a
They are
mistake.
incomplete, though.
But
They
they're-
are complete. I
but
meant
they're-
to I think I handed out the May 17th instead of the June.
Okay.
and it,
My apologies.
there's some
So they're
blanks.
blanks
Yes.
that need to be filled in,
Yeah.
so I don't think we're ready for it.
No, you're not, but I do
Okay.
have it. completed.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine, that's
Give me
fine.
5 minutes to do executive
Okay, so that's the end of the minutes. And, and now, we need to go into executive session to describe this
you have to turn the
legal situation that has to do with Northborough Realty. So, thank you. Yep.
To go to executive session
Yep.
for that item.
Okay, so I would
Read
like,
the item.
I would like to make a motion to go into executive session, closed executive session, for the town solicitor, the town solicitor's explanation of litigation involving Northborough Realty Holdings LLC. Is that good enough?
Statute. That statute.
And Rhode Island general laws, section 42-46-5A2, litigation, update on case number NC-2021-0201. And this is Northborough Realty Holdings LLC versus Tiverton Zoning Board of Review, sitting as the Board of Appeals. How's that? Good.
Second.
And we have a second from Adam. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor? Okay, now we're in executive session. Now what happens?